Okay, welcome to the recorded lesson for what should have been live Unit 3, 6, and 7, technically, getting energy and digestion. Um, what you need to be aware of is you do have homework, and the recording from today's what would have been session has all those live links if you want to access those. I also plan to post this in the announcements so you can access them there. All right, let's get started. Make a note on the board for which answer you think is the best response. And I'll read the question for you. It says, producers, like this plant, take in oxygen and release carbon dioxide during some process, just like animals and other living things. So our options are decomposition, photosynthesis, transformation, and cellular respiration. I need you to read the question very carefully. No, it's a fair point. Savia's reminding us to read very carefully. Transformation is never something we've talked about. So that leaves us with cellular respiration and photosynthesis. I'm going to delete these here for just a second, but hold that thought. We've got votes for D, cellular respiration. How do you know the difference here? Well, let's look through it. It says release or taking in oxygen and releasing carbon dioxide. So that is what you as an animal do, right? So photosynthesis would be the opposite of that process. So that's why it's not photosynthesis, because photosynthesis takes in carbon dioxide and leaves and releases oxygen. This is the opposite. And what a common misconception that my students undergo is they forget that all organisms have to undergo cellular respiration at some point to get to the energy. Where do we find chloroplasts? I love illustrations. I'm a very visual learner. So I want you to look through all of these potential pictures and identify the place that's the most best answer, that's good grammar, to where do we find chloroplasts. I've got one vote for plant cells. And if you look at the pictures, it tells you there you'll find them in a leaf, which is on a plant. Here is a picture of the inside of a flatworm, and you don't see any chloroplasts labeled here. You don't see anything that's represented as green either. So it's not animal cells, and you ought to know at this point that you don't have any here in the complicated human energy combustion system. All right, that brings us to the second one. Flatworms are just like plants because they use chloroplasts to help make their own food. Well, yep, I just answered that for you. Flatworms do not photosynthesize. They don't have chloroplasts. So that answer would be false. Flatworms and humans get energy from other organisms. That makes them what? So these guys, this, which is you, and the flatworm, if they get their energy from another source, okay, the word hetero or the prefix hetero means different, right? So heterotrophs get them from eating another or a different organism. And I'm going to move along off of this. If this is the most basic concept of the three representative organisms that we're going to be comparing. So if you do have questions about these, you do need to make sure you reach out. The two learning targets we need to focus on is to revisit and explain the importance of ATP for all organisms. And I'm going to go ahead and highlight the all part of this. Now, remember that ATP was the energy currency. Do you remember we talked about that in when we talked about photosynthesis and energy last semester? But it's the energy currency. It's how we pay for stuff to get done, work in our bodies. All bodies, all organisms have to go through this. They have to access ATP. There you go. That's how important it is. I'm highlighting it and bolding it. All right, and then we're going to compare the processes for acquiring energy in a flatworm, a human, and a plant. Those are our three representative organisms. So when we talk about flatworms, there are some basic characteristics that I discussed with you. I asked you guys to download the slides from the last presentation and sort of read up on it. They are invertebrates, which means they're no vertebra. They don't have a spinal cord. They have bilateral symmetry. Bi is two, lateral is sides. They have two sides that are the same. So if I were to take this cute little planaria here and split it in half, if I could get it exactly right, then both halves of that organism would be the same on each side. Another type of bilateral organism would be a starfish. If you split a starfish in half, they'd be the same on each side. You are bilateral. All right, flatworms can be parasites. I'll introduce you to a couple on the next slide. And today we're focusing on the digestive tract. It's a very simple digestive tract. They do not have a series of organs. So you have a mouth, pharynx, stomach, intestines, another set of intestines, poop chute, and all that stuff. They don't have any of that. It's a very simple system we'll talk about. We are later going to be covering how they respond to the environment, i.e. eye spots, which are just too cute up there. Their reproductive and their nervous systems, and how they transfer gases between them and the environment. This is a marine flatworm. It's very exotic looking, probably because it's toxic. This is called a fluke. You probably know it as a, excuse me, you probably know it as a bloodsucker. Leech, that's the word, aka leech. And the final one, the tapeworm, is an intestinal parasite that we could accidentally pick up by eating food that's not cooked properly. And those are really interesting if you wanted to gross yourself out and watch some YouTube videos. I can't stress enough, although I do keep trying, the difference between auto and heterotroph. Auto make their own food, heterotrophs consume others. It's as simple as that, and you need to get it down. All right, flatworms are heterotrophs. They rely on light and chemicals left behind by their prey to hunt the food down. So these eye spots that we see are receptive to light. They're not actual eyeballs, and they sense chemicals in the aquatic environment around them, like footprints left behind to track down their prey. So the point is they are predators. Ferns, or plants, when we talk about that and we're talking about energy and digestion, you might think to yourself, like, why aren't we comparing plant digestion to animals and I should say humans and flatworms? Well, the bottom line here is we can't compare because plants have no digestive system. So there's nothing I can show you. All they have is a vascular system to move the water and stuff around, but it doesn't digest things there. So their energy source is sunlight, which I know you know already. So I'm not trying to insult your intelligence, just to reinforce that they're autotrophs. And let's put that word on the board again. Autotroph. Bingo. All right, so the type of energy that cells require in both plants and animals is called ATP. And if you felt like spelling that out, it's adenosine triphosphate. And I will link a video if you don't remember that at all. I'll link another video in the content that discusses how that's formed. It's a very short video, just a cycle. But basically, it comes from glucose. Put it down here. It comes from the breakdown of glucose in the cell. That's all you really need to know. So that's why glucose is so important when we talk about energy. The process that breaks down glucose is called cellular respiration. Okay, and so it sounds like you're saying the cell is breathing. It's not. Cellular respiration is called that because some of the byproducts of cellular respiration are carbon dioxide and water vapor. And that's the big one, ATP. Okay, so because the plant, or I should say, the organism is producing carbon dioxide, that's why we call it respiration. Just like when you breathe out, you're releasing carbon dioxide. Here's a brief explanation of this in picture form. All organisms, including plants, I'm going to stress that enough, including plants, use cellular respiration to make usable energy. Sure, they also use plants use sunlight to capture the energy into glucose, but then they take that glucose and they break it back down into ATP. Okay, so again, just to reiterate, all organisms, that means flatworms, plants, and humans, bacteria, use ATP. And they all undergo cellular respiration to do that. This should be a test question you definitely get right. So when we talk about digestion, particularly, it's the process of breaking food into smaller forms, okay? So the molecule that we start with is glucose. All right, types of digestive systems that we need to cover are open or closed. And I'm pretty sure that means, open means there's an opening at both ends. There's an opening at the beginning of the process where you put the food in, and there's an opening at the end where the food exits out. For us, the entrance is the mouth, the exit is the rectum, anus, right? The poop chute. There you go. It's an open tube, basically. There are some things in between the mouth and the anus that we're going to talk about. Steps of human digestion, take 2. I'm trying to put all of these small details for the steps on one slide so that you can have them in one place when you're studying. And you should probably do the same when you're writing down your notes. You know where the mouth is. I don't feel like that's something I should need to point out to where you should find that. But the pharynx is not necessarily obvious to those people who haven't taken anatomy. We're going to be comparing the pharynx with the pharynx of the planaria, of the flatworm, so it's important that I point this out to you. But the pharynx and the mouth are very close together. The pharynx, for those of you who are studying for the test, the pharynx is the path from the mouth to the stomach. I'm sorry, I'm wrong. I meant the esophagus. We're on to the next part. The esophagus is the path from the mouth to the stomach. So the esophagus is the long tube between the mouth and the stomach. The stomach is where you have digestive enzymes as acids, and the food is manually broken down here. In other words, it's tumbled around and around like a dryer with acids. The small intestine is where you'll find the first transferring of food to the blood system. So this is where the food molecules, the smallest molecules, we're just going to say food molecules, transfer to the blood system. The gallbladder stores bile for the liver, from the liver. So it stores bile, doesn't make bile, but it stores bile. The pancreas produces enzymes that break down carbohydrates and fats, proteins, and nucleic acids. So the pancreas produces digestive enzymes. Okay, the liver makes bile. And the liver also processes, I should say, filters the blood of toxins. So if you guys have any elderly parents or grandparents who've ever had like liver as a dinner option, we 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 try to recommend not doing that these days because there's so many toxins that the liver filters out for us that it can be um, hazardous as a carcinogen. The large intestine removes waters from the food. Well, it's not from what was the food. All right, so if you're dehydrated, you might get constipated because there's not enough, the body's taking water from the large intestine instead of letting it soften your stool. So the large intestine is this tract, and it starts where it connects to the small intestine, and it goes up and across and down. And that circular brown organ is your large intestine. This small thing here, for those of you who aren't aware, this small finger-like projection right here, that's your appendix. And so we talked about that as a possible vestigial organ. We're not sure what the purpose is other than just producing some bacteria and holding bacteria for our digestive system, the good bacteria that it needs. For those of you who want to pause the video and get it from a different perspective, here's what I just said, but with more words. The only thing that's not on here is the large intestines. Okay, comparing all of that to a closed digestive system. So instead of it being an open tube from mouth to anus, the planaria or flatworm, they have a closed system. There's only one opening, and this is the kicker. It's really important. The one opening takes in food and removes waste. I'm gonna let that sink in there for a second. So yes, the food enters the pharynx, which for us is close to our mouth, and the waste, the excrement, the poop, exits the pharynx as well. So the pharynx on a flatworm is not where ours would be, but the pharynx on a flatworm is this tube that you see extending out of its abdomen sometimes. Okay, so the pharynx is basically their mouth part. Okay, so the pharynx on a flatworm is kind of like their mouth. Let that sink in here for a minute. Yeah, I'm saying that they eat and release from their mouth part. And if you forget that, then this class is clearly not interesting enough. Okay. The flatworm catches its prey with the pharynx. It dissolves the prey with its mouth. It liquefies it. And then that liquefied organism enters this large gastrovascular cavity. Okay, so it's broken down in here, and then the vascular cavity distributes it to all the different parts of this organism. We can draw an arrow going both ways, out and in. That's the way. All right, so mouth would be the end of the pharynx, which is where the food is stored, and then the gastrovascular cavity distributes everything throughout the organ. You might want to take a snip of this. It's probably going to show up in some form on a test when we compare the digestive systems of humans and flatworms. Things that are the same between these two is that they're both heterotrophs and they both take in food for cellular respiration. And the reason there's no plants, because plants have no digestive system, because they're not. Okay, they are not heterotrophs. And I will distribute this to you guys. Thank you again. On your way out, make sure you're feeling okay. about comparing and contrasting, in this example, digestive system of humans versus flatworms. That's what we focused on today. Yeah, and that how they get energy in general. And thank you for sticking around with me. And I'm sorry this didn't go as well as planned today.